Hello everyone. Today I have brought you a game which was played in Grenke Open, which recently concluded. Divya Deshmukh was playing in this tournament, and this game is also played between GGM Gabber and Divya Deshmukh. So Divya Deshmukh, if you do not know, is an Indian sensation. She is an international grandmaster. She was a former national champion and probably, I'm not sure of the record, which is why I'm saying probably, the current Asian champion as well. So this game was played in the French defense. So let's take a look in this game. So Gabor started with e4 and Divya responded with e6. French defense after d4, she played d5. Gabor went for the advanced variation of the French defense. Divya responded with c5, and after c3, Divya developed her knight. Gabor also developed his knight, and Divya played queen to b6, further increasing pressure on the d4 pawn. Gabor played bishop to d3, ignoring all this threat because he can also capture. So in this position, black is actually winning a pawn, so he, Divya decided to go ahead. But the problem is that it's not actually, it's just a temporary sacrifice of the pawn. So white can easily recover this. So anyway, after pawn takes pawn, Gabor decided to simply castle. Now, if black captures the pawn, the knight will develop, recapturing the pawn. So, which basically, in a way helps white to develop. So, Divya decided to go against it and played bishop to d7. Now, Gabor played rook to e1, centralizing her rook, and for some reason Divya played e6. I do not understand why, but she played e6. Now, knight comes to d2. Divya also developed her knight, preparing knight g6, create attack on the e5 pawn, which is why Gabor played h4. Knight g6, h5 will simply boot up the, push the knight. But in this position, Divya captures the pawn, and this was rightly done because now knight is not on b1 to recapture the pawn with developing itself. So pawn takes pawn, and now this pawn is isolated, which is going to stay a weakness throughout the game. So now knight g6, but can white push h5? So let's see. If h5, bishop c5, and if pawn captures knight, obviously you can see this is the fork, and after into f1, it is not bishop takes rook, instead is pawn takes pawn, and now rook is coming. The position will be very soon very miserable for white, which is why Gabor decided to go against it, and after knight g6 he played knight to b3. Divya pulled back her queen to c7, creating further attack on the e5 pawn. Gabor decided to support it further. Alright, and now she could have continued with the bishop to e7. Most probably she did not went for that because h5 was also coming. So Divya played pawn to f6. This is also played already, so it's not a new thing. Pawn takes pawn, and now rook comes to b1. Gabor decided to put his rook on the semi-open file. Okay, Divya played bishop to d3, developing her bishop, and now knight comes to d5, creating attack on the e6. Now you can capture this knight obviously, but now this pawn will come into the center most probably. Because of that, she did not do it, and also she had to deal with the e6 pawn. So she could have simply put a knight in front of the pawn in order to protect it, but she decided to push the pawn itself. Okay, knight comes to f5, attacking the bishop on d3. So Divya decided to save it. Instead of capturing, she decided to save the bishop. Alright, now knight gives a check from g7, and king goes to d8, and now bishop to f5. Most probably Divya also wanted it because in the French defense, you always want to exchange the lightest square bishop. So bishop takes bishop, knight takes bishop. Now queen comes to d7, attacking the knight further. Gabor pulled back his knight to g3, and now king comes to c7, nicely connecting the rooks. Alright, now Gabor pushed his pawn to c4. If black captures, then obviously it will be good for white, since the only weakness that white camp has will be eliminated. So because of that, she should have pushed the pawn to d4, taking more central space, but she decided to prepare a queen rook battery. Okay, Gabor captures the pawn, and after queen takes pawn, now Gabor played knight to e4, forking this bishop and the pawn as well. Divya decided to go for attack on the rook, which is a good move as well, because first of all your rook is attacked, and now you can also once the rook is saved, you can also push the knight away with f5, obviously. But in this position, actually knight takes f6 is possible, since it is attacking the queen. So black cannot take the rook. Instead, first of all, black has to deal with the with this threat. So black comes to h7, and then after knight goes to e4. But now black can capture the rook. But in this position as well, the position is quite equal because of the virtually exposed king. And also white has a pawn on e4, which is also isolated, and because of that, that is also weakness. So despite of having all these developed pieces being exchanged up, the position is actually just equal. So but Gabor decided not to go for it, and instead of capturing the pawn on knight capturing the pawn on f6, he decided to play bishop to d2, stopping this threat. Divya exchanged the bishop, and Gabor decided to capture the bishop with the f knight instead of e knight, which would have been a little better. So now Divya got a chance of pushing away this knight. Knight goes to g5, creating a threat of coming to e6 with a check, and that will also fork the rook. sorry, I missed a point. So after pawn to f5, Divya didn't Gabor didn't went for knight g5. Instead, he played queen to e3, sacrificing the knight. The reason was that queen was coming to b3 with the check, and then after b2 pawn was also falling, and with all this queen rook patching on the b file, it would have been very dangerous for black. So Divya did not capture the knight. Instead, she offered an exchange of the queen, but Gabor obviously declined it and played queen to b3, now creating an attack on the b7 pawn. So Divya pushed the pawn to b4, and now everything is sorted. No problem. There is no problem. Further no problem. If queen, let's say, comes to f7 to give a check, we also have d7, and not to mention also knight to e7, which also saves the f5 pawn. So instead of doing all this, Gabor decided to go for knight g5, creating again the threat of knight e6. Now in this position, it will be a royal flop. So Divya first of all captured the knight, giving away this e6 square, because what was it? It could have been saved. Probably there is no good way, because this knight cannot come to rescue. Obviously knight to f1 was there, but again this fork is also there. So anyway, so queen takes knight, and knight comes to fork the king and the rook. King goes to b6, and now not knight takes rook. Instead, it will be rook to d1, rook b to d1. Now queen comes to h6. But this was actually a bad move, because instead of queen h6, Divya should have played queen to a5. The reason was that this rook would have been attacked. So you cannot simply capture the rook, since this queen capture rook will come with the check, and later on black can also recover the lost piece. So in that way, black will be up a piece. The right move for white in this position is to play queen to e3 first, and one king move. Then now you can complete the exchange. But Divya decided to play, in the last position where the rook comes, and Divya decided to play queen to h3 instead. Alright, so Gabor captured the rook, rook captures knight, and after rook takes rook, knight takes rook. Now Gabor played a4. This was the problem with queen to h6, that a4 was coming. If there was no f4, if she would have played queen to a5, then after queen e3, this you couldn't have played the a5, since it would have been captured. So anyway, after a4, knight comes to c6, and after pawn takes pawn, rook comes to b1, creating further attack on the pawn. So they just simply push the pawn to b4, and now it is nicely defended by the knight, so queen cannot capture it. Gabor brought his queen to e6 now, creating attack on the f5 pawn and also preparing rook to c1. Okay, Divya captured the pawn on h5, but instead of queen c1, Gabor captured the pawn. Okay, so after this, first of all, Divya Divya played knight to e7, creating attack on the queen. So queen goes to d6, and now the threat was to go rook a1 and creating a check on a6. So this threat could have been solved with the queen to d4, but this pawn was dying. So Divya first of all played pawn to h5, and now after rook to a1, she offered basically an exchange. But now Gabor declined and played his queen to a6, giving a check to the black king. And after king goes to c7, now he played rook to c1. Okay, now since this was not actually a threat because the knight is nicely defended by other knight, Divya simply played h4. But there was also rook to c4, forking the pawn and the queen. So Divya, instead of saving anything, she gave a queen trade offer, and Gabor again declined it. So queen goes to a1, and now what to do? Divya simply pushed a pawn to b3, and now rook captures the other pawn. Am I doing right? Let me see if I've went somewhere wrong. No. Okay. So sorry. I went somewhere wrong. Okay. After king to a1, Divya played queen to b and king to b7. The reason was to take away all the square which was on the a file, giving a check to the king. So that Divya can freely move her queen. So now Gabor captures the h4 pawn, and Divya pushed her pawn to b3. Now queen blocks the pawn, but Divya played knight to d5. Knight to d4. Yeah, knight to d4. Gabor create attack on the knight. So Divya decided to support it further, and also preparing queen to c2, offering another exchange, and that will also control the queening square. And now king to h2. Simply a waiting move. Now black cannot go for queen c2. The reason was that rook takes knight will come with the check, and there will be white can simply refute this exchange of the queen in spite of winning the piece as well. So black simply cannot play the queen c2 right now. So first of all, Divya played king to b6, freeing up this knight, and also capturing this knight will not come with the check. So this exchange will be either forced, or once queen moves, she can push upon. So this was the idea. Gabor simply pulled back his rook to h3, creating an attack on the pawn. But now it's too late, because now queen c2 comes, and nicely defending the pawn as well. And if you capture it with the rook, the queen can capture it, because the queen is also defended by the knight, so pawn cannot be captured. Okay. Gabor played his queen to a3, creating a space for check, but Divya decided to stop it with knight c6, not going for pawn push just now. Alright. Now this was also a problem, because if you play this b2, then after check, okay, let's say a knight comes to block this check, then the rook was also coming, and you cannot remove the pawn. So this was a problem. So because of that, after queen to a3, see, first of all take care of this check, and now Gabor played his rook to h6, pinning this knight, and now this check is again available. But what will be the use of this check, because there is no rook on h3, which will also create a further attack on the pawn. So even if you give a check, it will be of no use. So because of that, they will simply push the pawn, and after queen comes to b4 with the check, knight promptly blocks, and Gabor played his last move, which was rook takes knight, expecting that if queen takes the rook, he can capture the queen pawn, but Divya simply captured the king, and Gabor resigned. So this was the game, and very recently I have also created a game on the same French defense, but in that game Magnus Carlsen was playing with white, and he beaten the French defense in just 20 moves. In that video I have also told that I have also created a collection of game in which white is simply winning against the French defense in less than 25 moves. If you are someone who struggles with the French defense playing against while playing against the French defense, then I highly recommend to check out that collection. You will understand the repertoire that is very lethal towards the French defense. So I hope that you will like the last video of the Magnus Carlsen playing against French defense, and as well as the collection that I created of the French defense. As always, if you have any suggestion for my videos, please let me know in the comment. For now, take care. Goodbye.